This is a short video talking about Concert, how I use it here at the Eccles. So this is going to be a little bit different because I'm using it on my computer as opposed to using it on a project PC or Windows machine, however you network in to control the network. But it's all basically the same thing. This is current as a version 4.0 of Concert. That's the version that's currently loaded on the project PC here at the Eccles in the lighting booth. For this recording, I'm going to be using Concert 4.5.1, but they're basically the same thing, and ETC is relatively pretty good at keeping things basically the same as the versions come out, so this information should be relevant for a while. That is, assuming that we're using the same equipment. But anyways, kind of going into it, you're going to be looking for this symbol here. Let me type in so I can kind of make it a little bigger for you. This is Concert. It's got this white dot with a bunch of blue, kind of lines going off of it. Kind of hard to miss, but yeah, that's Concert. So I'm just going to boot it up right here. It should look like this when you boot it up. Somewhat, it's going to look like this where you have a bunch of getting started points. Typically, I don't go through any of these options. I usually go up here. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sync up with the network map. And what that's going to do is that's just going to ping everything in the network and create a map for you, instead of you building it yourself or trying to load another version of a file or a file that you saved previously. So this is just going to be me showing you how to do it on my offline computer. So I'm currently not hooked up to the network, so I'm going to be opening up a file that I got from the project PC. But just so you know, this is what you're going to want to click on, is the connect to network map. It'll take a few seconds to ping everything in the network, and then it will show you a map of everything. But for the time being, I'm just going to open it up something. I'm going to go over here to browse. And I'm just going to go into here. I'm going to open up one of mine. You may consider wanting to save a bunch of different versions. You can see this one is from March 31st, 2025. And this is, I believe this was for Life of Pi, here probably at the Eccles. But you can choose to save a bunch of different files and reload that and re-push everything back to the system if you want to do that. I like to just go in and change everything manually, but there's a million different ways you can do it. This is just how I do it. So right now I'm just going to open this one just so you can see what it should look like for you. It'll go relatively fast because I'm not pinging everything. This is all offline, of course. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can see this is the whole network here. This cloud in the middle is the network, relatively speaking, local network. You can see down here in the device library, it'll tell you everything that is in this network, or everything that can be in this network. My apologies. Discovered devices. Never mind. Ignore what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to focus on what's really important. So you have two different kind of world views that you can see. There's workspace mode and there's spreadsheet mode. When I am working on sensor racks, when I'm changing the ThruPower modules, switching them dimming, switched, always on, what have you, I typically do that in the workspace view. And then when I'm controlling gadgets, I go over here to spreadsheet. So first I'm going to show off how to use a gadget and how to control that. Not a gadget, my apologies, a gateway. How to control that. You can see we have 16 currently that was pinged that we had up here for Life of Pi, I believe it was. You can see that they're all labeled here. You can change the label if you like. You can see up here in the property editor, you can click on this, you can change it to whatever you want. These guys do have a physical label on them. You can see that they're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe we have 5 2-port gateways. But this is what they're labeled right now just for the ease of use. And you can see as I'm entering this property editor, I can see what each port is doing. So typically for the 2-port gateways, I'm always sending data out with them. I'm hanging them on the box booms, I'm hanging them on the balconies, what have you. And so I'm always sending data out of them, as you can see here on both of those. And what I typically do is I try to find a universe that is not being used by the console. And I typically find that it's best to go into the patch and look at that. Here I can do that actually really quickly if I boot up EOS real quick. Bear with me for a second while I boot this up. I may make a cut here. Okay, here we are up in this show file that I have. If I go up over to here and open up the patch, that's tab 12. If I open that up and I start typing something in here, say whatever, channel 1, you can see down here that these are all gray. That is being used. That is something in the network being used on one of these circuits here. And so if something is patched in our local network being used by our board, we do not want to connect dry lines for one of the shows where they're sharing the same universe with a bunch of different lighting fixtures. If they try to send data through there, our stuff is going to go crazy and it will not be a pretty picture. So I typically try to go out. You can even type in here if you want. I can go to 10. You can see that in 10, there is currently nothing being patched in there. And I haven't patched anything in here. Nothing in the patch list is set to Universe 10. So I can say, yeah, that one's empty. I can set whatever is here in my concert. I can say that if all of their stuff in the front of house is all on the same universe, I can just say that every port on this is Universe 10. And I can change that here just by double clicking and entering. You can see that this is going to be universe. This is going to be the start of the universe. Always keep that at 1. I don't see that there's any use to changing that. That'll just throw all the numbers off if you try to do that. So always go in there. And if you aren't getting any crazy, if you're not sending 2 universes, I always just set both of them to be sending out the same universe, just for the ease of, making sure that you're not telling the assistant or whoever's out there plugging it in to plug it into a certain port. Just makes it a lot easier if you're just setting both of them to output. So once I've done that, you will see here, it doesn't show what I'm showing right now, but it will show that it's like unsynced. These will be green, saying that they are synced. This one is currently not synced. And we need to go up here is you need to send device configuration. When you click on that and when you send that device configuration, it'll load down here telling you that it is currently sending. And then you'll also see once it is finished sending and it is all synced up, that is when it is all ready to go. So that's just a little bit on how to do for the 2-port. Another one that's very important is when setting up dry lines for a Broadway, where you're inputting for dry lines for connecting things front of house, typically for signer lights or just connecting their LEDs in the front of house. I'll look for here. Sorry, it's acting a little strange with my mouse pad here. If I go and I look for stage right, this one is stage right. This is a 4-port gateway. So you can see that there is 4 ports. Currently, the one on stage right, port number 4, is not working. Not quite sure why that is. Hopefully that gets resolved soon. But just for these 3 ports here, we typically use 1 or 2 at most for the Broadways. Some of the bigger ones may use more. What is using more? Wicked right now, which is here, they're currently using 3 because they have 2 separate universes on house right and house left. So I physically labeled that on the switch. I'll include a picture of that here so you can see what that looks like. But yeah, basically the same thing, except they are inputs. So when you're connecting dry lines, since it is just copper, you can go both ways with it. So just having a male-to-male adapter so they can plug the female end of a DMX cable into there, which will, receive DMX. So inputting DMX into that one. I have the first one set to 1 so they control the signer lights in the house. Number 2, that is 15. Believe that is for just one side of the house. I'm not going to get into specifics. And then this is for the other side of the house, 25. I found that both of those universes, if I go into here, I can see that 15, nothing in 15, 25, nothing. There is something in 25, but that's something different. I'm confusing myself right now. Because this is actually not Wicked, this is Life of Pi. That's why it's set like that. My apologies for that. That's from a previous show. I need to fix that. But you get the idea, is that just sending universes for each side, making sure that it's very clear and you're mapping which universe is free for which side of the theater, or however you're connecting up the LEDs and the front of house. So that's all you really need to know about the gateways. Pretty simple. Just remember to sync everything up so that If you're confused why it's not updating on the device, make sure to do that. Sometimes you may know that the devices get a little funky when they're trying to connect to the lighting system. I always just find, just unplugging it from the Ethernet port and plugging it back in. They're all powered through Power over Ethernet, so just turning it off, turning it back on again, will make them start thinking and get them back on the network. Going into talking about sensor racks, because we do have ThruPower modules, Sensor 3 racks made by ETC, you can actually control all this in the Concert software, so you do not need to physically take things out and put things back in. So I'm going to show you a little bit. I'm going to zoom in, and they should be here on the bottom. You can see they're labeled dimmer rack, but they are sensor racks. Dimmer rack just because it's more conventional. So if I double click on this, you can see it comes up with a pop-up, and you can see all the lugs, all the different circuits in here, and each individual circuit is able to be changed to whatever you need it to be. So it does not need to be, you can have one dimmer and one switched on the same lug, because they are typically together. It is a little bit different if you're used to switching out physical ones. These are very smart modules so that you can change them to be whatever, so you don't need to worry about doubling those guys up. So talking a little bit about these, if I were going down to, say, 96, these are all set to dimmable, which is pretty conventional for if you're putting any source 4s on these. But if you click on this, you can change them to a couple different modes. The one that I will always switch them to is to switched. And I do that because that is what ETC recommends for turning off and on circuits for LEDs. So for turning off and on stuff for LEDs, if you're parking them on your board, I can show you here on my EOS family. So what I will do is I have pop up here starting at macro 807. If I click on that, it's going to start everything up. It's going to park a bunch of channels and stuff, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. Once all that's done, see it parks 998. It makes all the crossover lights turn on. About that, I'm currently in a rehearsal as I'm recording this. But anyways, continuing on, what I was saying is that you can see that these circuits were parked here. You can see that they are just addresses. I typically don't, patch them into channels because I don't really need to. I'm just using the circuits. So the most important thing is that when I am updating the sensor rack, I'll make sure to do all my changes. Switch them to switchable, or if the show requests it, you can do always on. Switch them to that, and then, of course, do the same thing. Apply, and then send device configuration. I have a loading bar on here. I usually wait a couple seconds after, just to make sure that everything's all nice and, updated before I start parking things on, because it is switching different modules inside of the power module. Instead of using the dimmer, it will use the relay circuit in there. So I always just give it a couple seconds just to make sure that it's not going to be all freaking out when I start parking things on and giving things power. Usually just wait a couple seconds. And then I go into my board, and then I park these values on. And then everything should be lighting up all in order. As I was saying, that ETC does recommend using switched for their LED fixtures, or just for any LED fixtures. Switched or always on, they both do the same thing. Switched can be turned off and on in the board. Typically, I find that most Broadways do like when I turn off their lights at the end of the night and then turn them back on when I get back in the next day. They prefer that. Wicked, that it's here right now, they prefer that it's always on, just so they don't have to fuss with it or worry about it, even though, they trust that I can turn it on and off. Whatever the case, both of those are preferred. I do not like parking LEDs on dimmable circuits. I may do that for just like a day of thing, if it's like a comedy show, or if it's just a quick rock and roll concert that's just a one day thing. I'll just set that to a dimmable circuit and I'll just forget about it. It's not enough power to do any serious damage, but I will say for a Broadway show that is in for a week to maybe a month or so, definitely you want to be switching that to a switch mode, because they are expensive equipment. You want to make sure that they're not getting damaged over time. So it's always nice to do that. Apply changes, send device configuration. that's the whole deal. You can see that they are kind of sitting right next to each other. The order in which that everything gets synced up does change every time that you load this up and connect to the network map. So it may look a little bit different. But that's just the general gist on how to do this. If there are any issues, of course, you can reach out to me and I'll try to help you configure that. But that's all I got for you. Thanks very much.